All right, Indigenous America, part 2. So here we have the Great Serpent Mound. This is not in Mississippi. This is the Mississippian culture or people. This is considered an earthwork, and this is in Ohio. So if you are here and you are standing at this part of the spiral, which is kind of considered part of the tail of the serpent, this is basically a cliff edge that you could then look down into this ravine or this river down here. Okay, so this is considered an effigy mound. The function, this is kind of like a Stonehenge. The function here is very unknown. Could have been influenced by comets. It could have been influenced by a specific lunar eclipse. So this is believed to represent a serpent. So we can see a snake, right? The head is up at the top right, and then it kind of swirls or zigzags down to the spiral tail. A serpent swallowing an egg could represent a lunar eclipse or a mythical horned serpent. The function and symbolism of the mound is not known. There are burial mounds nearby, but there's no traces of body or burial happening in this spot. So it was not used for burials. This is the largest of the native North American earthworks. There are others that are like this in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, and Illinois that depict animals. This is approximately 1,330 feet long and about 4 feet high. You really can't tell until you're down there looking at it, how high it is. Rattlesnake is a symbol in Mississippian iconography. So that could mean something with this piece. Snakes are associated with crop fertility, so wanting to have a good harvest. And it could represent Halley's Comet that happened in 1066, the year 1066. All right, so how does it relate to this? Besides being a spiral, they are both earthworks. And this is Robert Smithson's Spiral Jetty in Utah, Salt Lake City, Utah. Oh, so they're both in America. That's another relation. Okay, this is a big one. So this piece is called, well, it's called a lot of things, but this is all from the Templo Mayor, which is the main temple in Tenochtitlan, which is Mexico City. So this is going to be Aztec, even though the piece on the middle bottom, that green kind of face, is a different culture, previous culture called Olmec. So the Olmec, they have that jade Olmec face, pretty sure it's jade, to represent, jadeite. It shows that the Aztecs collected and embraced artwork from other cultures. The fact that they had that was found on site. All right, so let's first, the calendar stone is on the top left. So the calendar stone has a circular shape that reflects the nature of time, a place where rituals took place on certain days. The Aztecs felt they needed to feed the sun god human hearts and blood regularly. So that's why human sacrifice is associated with the Aztec people. The tongue in the center of the stone, that is no longer there, coming from the god's mouth, was a sacrificial flint knife used to slash open the victims. Use the calendar stone as an altar to murder victims and then throw them down the steps of the temple to the base where the Kolyoshoki stone rests. And the Kolyoshoki stone was on the right. So they would make these human sacrifices on the top of this temple, and then they would throw the bodies down, and then the bodies were supposed to then land, hopefully, on this Kolyoshoki temple. And that was supposed to relate back to the Aztec myth about Kolyoshoki, about their creation myths. Okay, so Kolyoshoki means she of the golden bells. That's the stone on the right. So called because of the bells that she wears as earrings. The Aztecs dismembered their enemies and threw them down the stairs of the Great Pyramid of the Templo Mayor to land on this stone. It is a circular relief stone. Kolyoshoki and her many brothers plotted the death of her mother, Kotlekue, who became pregnant after tucking a ball of feathers down her bosom. When Kolyoshoki chopped off Kotlekue's head, a child popped out of the severed body, fully grown, and that is who dismembered Kolyoshoki, who fell dead at the bottom of this shrine. So this represents the dismembered moon goddess who is placed at the base of the two pyramids of Tenochtitlan. The Aztec sacrifice people, we talked about that. So this is a relationship between death and decapitation of Kolyoshoki with the sacrifice of enemies at the top of Aztec pyramids. Oh, this also would have been brilliantly painted. And we looked in class, it was like blue and red and had all these really bright colors. And now we can just see the stone. Okay, the temple itself. The temple is located in modern-day Mexico City and was once the main temple of Tenochtitlan. The temple was built in honor of Huitzilopochtli, that is the god of war, and Tlaloc, the god of rain. It was the center of religious life for over 300,000 residents of the city. The temple is very site-specific. There was the myth of when the Aztec people were looking for where to create their land, they were told that they were going to see an eagle perched upon a cactus eating a snake, and they saw that in the middle of a lake, Lake Texcoco. So that is where they built Tenochtitlan, and that is where they built this temple. This is a high stepped pyramid with an altar at the top where the human sacrifices would happen. The human sacrifices emulated religious myths and were believed to help the world in balance. Yeah. The carved serpent heads on the staircase throughout the temple guarded the entrance to the high altar. Okay. All right, so I've got the Kolyoshoki stone here. What does that have to do with these other pieces? So you've got the anthropomorphic stela. Where are we? Whoa, buddy. Yeah, anthropomorphic stela. You've got Victory adjusting her sandal. That's from the Acropolis. She's kind of reaching back to take her sandal off so she can go walk in the sacred temple with no shoes. And then you've got Akhenaton, Nefertiti, and their 3 daughters. And that's a great example of a sunken relief. All the other pieces are considered relief. I'm not sure if Nike adjusting her sandal is considered high relief, but that's from the high classical period. So we'll go ahead and say it's high relief. And then the Egyptian one is sunken relief. So yeah, these are all relief. You got it. Good job. All right, the Aztec ruler's feathers headdress from Mexico. So it's Aztec. The materials are really important with this one. So it's got Quetzal and Cotinga feathers and gold. Why not gold? Just throw some gold in there. So headdresses like this one were worn by the royals, the priests, the dignitaries, and the honored warriors. It was believed that masks and headdresses linked those wearers to the gods and allowed them to take on those spiritual powers. Originally, the headdress, kind of like the Shaman de Huantar nose ring, by wearing that nose ring, they were given supernatural powers. So you can relate that to this Aztec feather headdress. Originally, the headdresses would have been more three-dimensional to fit around the wearer's head. The feathers of the Quetzal and Cotinga birds used in the headdress, which were gathered from the lowland rainforests, were highly prized for their color and their rarity and were collected as taxes or tribute. They represented the god Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent who can move through all 3 of the world, sky, earth, and underworld. This headdress, actually, let me talk a little more about the materials from the other book. If I can find it. There's Templo Mayor. It's right down there. All right, so there's 400 feathers here. 400 long green feathers are the tails of the sacred Quetzal birds, and these male birds only produce 2 feathers each. So each bird has 2 feathers, and they've got 400 feathers here. Those poor birds. The number 400 symbolizes eternity, so that's why there's 400 on here. This is the only known feather headdress in the world. What happened, this headdress was taken to Spain after the Spanish conquest and was considered to be the property of the ruler Montezuma. Scholars now believe that it most likely was not. The ruler would have worn a turquoise crown instead. Okay. All right, so what would this have in relation to these other pieces? So what are these other pieces? Obviously, Ahu'ula from Pacific, you can relate to feathers. So the other ones, you've got the screen with the siege of Belgrade and hunting scene on the bottom left, and then the Virgin of Guadalupe on the top right. And those both have a process called enconchado. Enconchado. Every time it's in my head. All right, so enconchado just means inlaid mother of pearl. So we're connecting these that they all have some type of exotic material put into them. And Spanish. No, never mind. I went in a weird place. Sorry. How are we doing on time? All right, we'll do one more and then we'll take a break. Oh my gosh, we have a lot. Okay, so we've got the maize cob. Everybody loves the maize cob. This is sheet metal. Really important about this one is the process, the repoussé. So they have a sheet of metal, and repoussé means you are hammering it out to create the sculpted form. So it's like relief from the other side, basically. So maize or corn is the principal food source in the Andes. Maize was celebrated by having sculptures fashioned out of sheet metal. Black maize is very common in Peru, and the oxidized silver reflects the black. It's recalling the black maize. May have been a part of a garden from Cuzco, in which full-size metal sculptures of maize plants and other items were put in place alongside other plants. It may have been used to ensure a successful harvest, and it is using the repoussé technique. Let's see if my other book has anything. This is one of only 3 of these small sculptures that still exist, and it is believed to come from the main temple of Cuzco, where, according to reports from an explorer, there was a garden planted with golden maize. The explorer reported that the garden was used 3 times a year for rituals relating to the sowing and harvesting of maize. Okay, connections. So you've got the fibulae, Merovingian looped fibula. That was kind of like a brooch they would wear. The golden stool on the top right, and then the Baptisterie de St. Louis on the bottom right. So these are all metal works. All right, we gotta take a break. Break time.